This is not politically correct to talk about, but I want to put it out there because I'm not afraid to talk about the truth.
By 2040, at the current rate of projection, there'll be a 55% increase in cancer risk. Today on the show, I'm joined by Dr. William Lee. He is an award-winning scientist, medical doctor, and a New York Times best-selling author. His groundbreaking research has affected more than 70 diseases, including cancer, diabetes, and obesity.
Well, you mentioned my mother's case. She was going to get chemo. We put her on immunotherapy, and chemo would have really destroyed her health. Immunotherapy, which activates her own body's immune system, and by the third treatment, she went from stage 4 to stage 0. Cancer is starting to affect younger and younger people. When our gut bacteria are negatively impacted, man, did that set us up for diseases like cancer. Cancer is just a normal cell that's gone haywire. The one thing that really sets them off is inflammation, and foods that we eat can either stimulate inflammation, like beverages, like soda. On the other hand, there are many foods that can actually lower inflammation, which tips the environment towards a more peaceful, quiet, normal, healthy cells.
Could you please give us maybe 1 to 2 of these foods and then tell these guys where they can connect with you before you run away? You know, on this show, I've had the pleasure, I think 6 Nobel laureates, 400 guests. By this point, your CV is one of the most impressive. Your work has, for instance, led to the development of more than 30 new medical treatments, targeted, I believe, more than 70 diseases: diabetes, blindness, heart disease, obesity, just to name a few. And I would love to
Yes.
kind of get into the cancer risk that you
Sure.
mentioned, because prior to this, I was reading on the Cancer Research UK website, and I was just shocked to read that they said that by 2040, at the current rate of projection, there'll be a 55% increase in cancer risk. And that frightens me for one reason, because there seems to be so much money, time, effort, energy, public awareness spent on it. Do you have kind of any idea what could perhaps be driving these numbers up?
Yeah, it's such a good question. We in the medical community are grappling with this stunning growth in cancer. Not only the statistic you just cited, but even more importantly, and perhaps more frighteningly, cancer is starting to affect younger and younger people. Teenagers are developing colon cancer now. 20-year-olds are developing colon cancer. We're seeing this. I mean, when did this start happening, right? It used to be cancer was a disease of aging, and now we're having a conversation about aging and longevity, but actually we're beginning to see some of the greatest threats that can rob us of more years occurring earlier. So I'll tell you, although we don't know the number, listen, you've interviewed other scientists on your show, so I'm sure you appreciate a real scientist is somebody who might have lot of knowledge, but is definitely not a smarty pants. Real scientists tell you when they don't know something. All right, because that's as a scientist, we spend most of our time talking about what we don't know, not what we do know. So I want to address your question by saying we don't really understand what's driving this expansion of cancer and the decrease in the age that we're actually beginning to see it. However, there are lots of speculations that are probably, most of them are probably have some, are probably correct in their own way. All right. So it's not one cause, but number one, we are living longer as a community. So as you get older, you just get more at risk for diseases that take out older people, which includes cancer. So that's one easy explanation, but that's not the most satisfying or likely one. The other one is that our environment is degrading. Okay. And if you really think about it, the ozone layer is degrading. Our soil is degrading. This is something I'm working on now. A lot of people don't realize this, but the earth that we walk on is not the earth that, 2 or 3 our great grandparents walked on. The soil's been depleted. It's got toxins in the soil. That dust that blows, down the street, or if you are visiting a destination someplace and you're wearing your sunglasses and looking cool, and you see this, gust of wind blowing some dust, there's a lot of stuff in that dust today that we didn't have before. And even in the air that we breathe, it's contaminated with a lot of toxins. And so our lifetime, we call it the exposome. You've heard of the human genome. Well, there's the human exposome, which is the net sum of all the things that we're exposed to over the course of our modern lives, probably contributes to this tendency in our body to form more cancers. Now, there's some other internal things that are probably going on as well. You probably have heard, anybody listening to this, that the gut microbiome, our healthy gut bacteria, one of the most important health defenses in our body, our gut bacteria, healthy bacteria, 39 trillion of these, mostly living in the last third of our gut, the colon. All right. When they are properly functioning, they're like a really healthy, vibrant community, like a neighborhood. All right. And what they do as a helpful community to our health, they lower inflammation. They improve our metabolism. They help us fight excess body fat. They improve our immune system, which can defend against cancer. And they also can help cut off the blood supply that could feed cancers as well. On top of that, our gut bacteria, when they're doing well, text message our brain. They SMS our brain. They WhatsApp our brain. And they prompt our brain cells to release neurotransmitters. These are hormones from our brain, including social hormones that give us a sense of well-being. All right. And when we impact our gut microbiome, how do you actually destroy your gut microbiome? Well, you eat ultra-processed foods, which we know is a big problem in modern age. Artificial sweeteners have now been identified and implicated in destroying your gut microbiome. Thickeners that you would have in low-fat foods impact negatively your gut microbiome. When you do that over time, even when food manufacturers, for example, are well-meaning to kind of create something tasty and inexpensive and widely available, we've been doing this for decades. All right, and hey, that's part of our internal exposome we have subjected our body to. And when our gut bacteria are negatively impacted, man, did that set us up for diseases like cancer, because inflammation goes up, our protective immunity goes down, our metabolism goes out of whack, we start growing extra harmful inflammatory body fat. It's a chain reaction, our gut microbiome. And then the last thing I'll just point out, among many things we could spend 2 or 3 episodes talking about. But the last thing I want to point out that's new, because this has emerged since the last time I was on a podcast, is the recognition that microplastics in our body probably do harm. Now, what is a microplastic? These are tiny little plastic particles that are in our food. That plastic food container you buy from the grocery store and you put it in the microwave, or you put it in the oven, or you shake something out of a plastic bag. Hey, that plastic has rained onto the food and you're eating it. That water bottle, you're going to a beach for the summertime or going to an island, it is hot, man. And you want to stay hydrated, which is important for health. So you go and get a bottle of water, right? And you drink that water, that bottle is shedding microplastics. Or even a cup of tea, right? A proper cup of tea. Whether it's a breakfast tea or whether it's an afternoon, you take your afternoon tea. Tea bags are, even the ones that look like they're paper, are sprayed with a tiny layer of plastic to prevent the paper from ripping, just to give them a little more strength. And in hot water, that plastic sheds into the hot water and you're drinking it. So how much plastic are we actually drinking or consuming through our food? It's estimated that every single week, Monday through Sunday, we are eating a credit card's worth of microplastic in our body. And we can find plastic now that we're looking for it and we're onto it. We're finding microplastic floating in our blood. We are finding microplastic in the lining of our blood vessels. In fact, there was one study that came out of Italy late last year, that showed in people who had plastic stuck in the plaques, in the clogging areas of their blood vessels, compared to people who didn't have plastic stuck in their narrowing the plaques. Okay, that if you had plastic in there, you had a 4-fold increase, 1, 2, 3, 4, increase in the risk of fatal heart attack or stroke. All right. It's a correlation, but a powerful one. We're also finding microplastic in the human brain. So much plastic that if you were to actually measure someone's brain on a scale, the kind of scale you would use in a lab, all right, you can actually measure somebody who hasn't been exposed to plastic versus somebody who's had a lifetime of plastic. The weights are different. You can actually weigh out the amount of plastic in your brain. Finally, they're finding plastic in your testicles. They're finding plastic in human semen. Squirt. Now you look inside, there's plastic in there. And they're even finding urologists who are, treating erectile dysfunction. When they do the biopsy, they're finding plastic embedded in the tissue of the penis. All right. So I've made my case, I think, that this is something that we need to pay attention to. And plastic causes inflammation, which then sets us at risk for developing all kinds of chronic diseases, including cancer. So these are probably just some of the many factors that actually are descending upon us. So means that to prevent cancer, which is part of the work that I do, we have to shore up our health defenses. We need to fight inflammation, and we really need to be mindful in every decision we make in terms of what we're putting into our body. And that goes for the packaging of the food as well.
One of the fascinating things about what you just beautifully said was that I feel that many people take a deterministic view of kind of cancer. As we said earlier, they assume that it's a disease of the elderly or it's driven by genetics. But when you look at the kind of increase in rates, then one starts to question, well, to what extent then is this driven, as you said, by actually changes in lifestyle factors? Impairments in sleep, in the poor social relationships, or dare I even say, those little things that we put on the end of our knives and forks that go into our body multiple times a day. So do you kind of share that kind of view that in fact is, there must be a huge lifestyle component to this?
Absolutely. We didn't even get into lifestyle, but think about it. We now are addicted to screens for better or worse. I like to think of the glass as half full. So there's so many good things that we get out of the internet and our ability to be able to access information and to watch things. I mean, compared to when I was growing up and probably when you were growing up as a kid, I mean, imagine children today, they just have just so much more access to things. And there's a good part to that. But it also makes us sedentary, right? And sedentary means like sitting in our butts, not moving. And our bodies are designed to move. Our muscles are designed to move. So as we move less, our bodies are much more vulnerable to some of these chronic diseases. I mean, exercise, movement actually helps us build our immune system. Exercise helps us build a better gut health as well. You're sitting there on your screen the whole time, scrolling through, being, mentally entertained by the latest reels. I mean, look, I find them as funny as anyone else, and they're pretty addictive. But again, this is kind of a lifestyle issue that can impinge upon us as well. So I think that, the lack of exercise, and of course, we think about, we all know somebody, and maybe, someone listening, maybe you are this person who's working out all the time and has a trainer and, has got a great body and low body fat, all that kind of stuff. Maybe you're that person, but most people are not that person. And that counts.
One of the things that I think, emerged from the conversation that we had last time was that there is a real confusion. And I still remember the quote that you said to me. You said, I have an enemy with confusion. And I think that's what probably has drawn so many people to your work. And when it comes to the relationship, for instance, between these horrific diseases like cancer and nutrition, what is that relationship there in terms of, I guess, food as either an amplifier of disease or perhaps food in terms of a mitigator and something that can be used as medicine there?
Yeah. Let me try to give a very, very simple example. Cancer, let's use cancer as an example since we started talking about it. Cancer is just a normal cell that's gone haywire and kind of crazy. So have you ever gone on a spring holiday with a bunch of college students to a beach town? Most of those kids are perfectly fine. They're just having a good time. They're partying. Uh, but, every now and then there's going to be one kid who goes crazy and causes all kinds of problems. The cops get called. They probably get arrested and maybe somebody gets hurt. All right. Maybe they go to the hospital. Same deal with cells in our body. We've got 40 trillion cells. Most of them are healthy. Every now and then you get one cell that becomes a mutant, and it actually is a bad actor. And our body is supposed to be able to take care of it. Our immune system spots it, removes it. Our blood vessel system prevents it from feeding itself with new blood vessels. Our DNA protection system neutralizes the damage that could cause more bad guys to arise. We're pretty well suited to protect ourselves. And the one thing that cancer cells, like that little tiny, crazy kid on the beach at the beach party, all right, the one thing that really sets them off is inflammation. So let's boil it down to something really simple. The food that we eat can either raise inflammation and really get that bad actor to go haywire even more. It's like encouraging the drunk guy at the party. All right. Now they're going to actually really cause problems. And that's inflammation. And foods that we eat can either stimulate inflammation, for example, ultra processed foods, artificial sweeteners, artificial preservatives, flavorings, coloring. Listen, I live in the United States. Europe actually is much smarter, much more protective of the population because they have much more rigid, strict rules for what they don't allow in their factory-made foods. Okay, what you can have people in the United States, it's a little bit of a free-for-all. We have some regulations, but there are certain things that you can get here, additives, etc., chemicals in our foods that you can't get in other parts of the world. So those could be pro-inflammatory. All right. By the way, drinking a lot of excess added sugar, like beverages, like soda, also stimulates inflammation. So I remember distinctly when I was in medical school, here we are all studying to be doctors, and we're trying to we're understanding root causes of disease, for example. And I had a classmate who always bragged that he would drink a 6-pack of soda, regular soda, every single day. 6-pack of soda every single day. Every can of soda has 9 teaspoons of cane sugar in it. So he was drinking 6 of those every single day, and he was pretty wired, very smart guy. But I always remember, like, holy cow, that is a heck of a lot of soda that you're pounding into your body, and that causes metabolic overload, which causes inflammation. All right, so that's an example of stimulating the bad guys. All right, with food. On the other hand, there are many foods that can actually lower inflammation, which tips the environment towards a more peaceful, quiet, normal, healthy cells. Back to the beach party, that's where the other people who are more calm tell the guy, who's going crazy, doing belly shots. Hey, you know what? Easy, man. Like we're no, let's not serve this guy anymore booze. All right. And so there are foods that can actually lower inflammation. And what are some of those foods? Well, guess what? There's so many. I can't give you a laundry list easily. You want to see the laundry list there in my books, Eat to Beat Disease or Eat to Beat Your Diet. I talk about them on my YouTube channel if you want to hear me talk about the individual foods. But they are all whole plant-based foods that we already know is better for our health and our longevity. What are some of my favorite ones? I love berries, strawberries, blackberries, raspberries, blueberries. They actually have anti-inflammatory substances, healthy oils, omega-3s that you can actually take as a supplement or as seafood. All right. And by the way, seafood is not just salmon or tuna. Seafood is mussels and clams and shrimp and crab and lobster, a whole variety of different types of seafood, and healthy oils, which you can actually get in extra virgin olive oil. I mean, who has not gone to a Mediterranean restaurant, be it Spanish, Italian, or Greek, as an example, and not enjoyed the taste of the food, which has most likely been cooked with or contains extra virgin olive oil, super powerful anti-inflammatory substances in that natural oil that comes from a part of the world, Mediterranean, whose diet, traditional diet, is among the healthiest on the planet. So, foods that are anti-inflammatory, whole plant-based foods, good, lowers risk. Foods that are inflammatory, sodas, ultra-processed foods, synthetic chemicals, those actually raise inflammation and they raise your risk. So, if you wanted to look at the on-off switch, the simplest possible way of thinking about it, when you're about to eat something, just think this. Am I about to put something that's going to stimulate inflammation, bring it up, the inflammation in my body, or turn it down? You always want to turn it down.
Yeah, no, that is such a fascinating point. And in fact, I feel that one of the questions actually, because we spoke so much last time, I'm going to link to our previous conversation about your last book, Eat to Beat Disease. And one of the things that we certainly had, we had so many comments from people on the show that had listened to the podcast. They had said that they were kind of going through, for instance, treatment, that they'd been diagnosed with cancer and they'd mentioned it to oncologists, and they'd kind of just been food. Poof, don't worry about it. Stick to these drugs or stick to these surgeries. And I'm just curious, because I know that this is also personal for you as well, because I know, for instance, you've been public in talking about what happened with your mother when she was diagnosed
Mm-hmm.
with cancer. But I'm curious,
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to the point that, God forbid, that you or I or any of our listeners were to actually receive a diagnosis, how do we then start thinking about nutrition at that point?
Yeah, it's a great question and it's complicated. Let me first say I'm a medical doctor. I went through the training, and the past generations of doctors were not given any education, any substantive education about nutrition at all. And in fact, I would argue that most doctors who are in practice today, when they were learning about how to treat disease, were probably living a fairly unhealthy lifestyle just by the nature of how medical school and medical training is. We're up 24, 36 hours. The hospital food was crap. We didn't have time to exercise. I remember at the very beginning when I went to medical school many years ago, they literally, doctors, the cardiologists used to take a break and go out to the smoking room, to smoke a cigarette. It was amazing, how times have changed. So I am sympathetic and a bit empathetic because I am a doctor, that most doctors did not have the benefit of the education. That's changed. If you look at the current crop, like this year's generation of graduating medical students, not only are they being exposed to nutrition in a new way that wasn't done before in their school and their training, but they themselves, partly because of listening to shows like yours and looking at social media, are themselves personally interested in food as medicine and nutrition and health. And so they make it their own personal business to be able to actually practice, preach what they practice themselves. It's a very important thing. If you don't practice it, how can you preach it, really? And so I think for a cancer patient who encounters an oncologist, probably an older oncologist, older school oncologist, who doesn't talk about nutrition, who dismisses it, that's very, very old school. Those guys are going to be dying out pretty soon, retiring, coming off the grid. And they're going to be replaced by people who are serious. Like we know. I can tell you this, even though I'm a more established doctor, I work on the cutting edge. So I'm not afraid to talk about this. If you are a cancer patient, please do go to an oncologist and find out what the latest treatments are for your cancer. If you're saying, if it's been told to you chemo is the latest treatment, find another oncologist, or ask the question again, because there are definitely targeted therapies, immunotherapies, all kinds of really, really advanced, promising things that, for example, you mentioned my mother's case. she was going to get chemo, was her fate. We put her on immunotherapy, and chemo would have like really destroyed her health, and that wouldn't have worked. Immunotherapy, which activates her own body's immune system, we only gave her 3 treatments, and by the 3rd treatment, when we scanned her, she went from stage 4 to stage 0. Okay, and so the impossible becomes possible. The unthinkable is now what the new generation is thinking. But for patients, cancer patients, you have to advocate for yourself. You got to realize that times are a changing, and you have to advocate for yourself. So if your doctor's not giving you all the options, you need to say, but what about this? What about that? That's where the screen time becomes really worthwhile. Research it yourself and figure out what's actually going on at the cutting edge, and find people that are willing to go to bat for you for that. Now, I can tell you that any modern oncologist, any modern doctor should be able to quickly respond to, Doc, what should I be eating? Listen, even if you don't know anything about food as medicine, all right, you have to be able to say, this is my point of view. Okay, every doctor, if I could magically wave a wand and say I have one piece of knowledge I want to impart on every doctor, and abracadabra, boom, they're all going to have it. All right, what I would say is this: every patient should pay attention to eating foods that help their gut bacteria become healthy. Good, healthy gut bacteria lowers inflammation. Lowering inflammation will actually help your body fight disease, put you at lower risk to develop new diseases, and help medications that your doctor might be prescribing, or that we might be prescribing from the physician side, work better. So if there was one thing that is unacceptable not to accept, it is that uh, every individual, whether you're a patient or not, should be tending to their own gut health. This is the garden in your body. All right, you want to have a nice garden. You don't want to have it overgrowing with weeds and poison plants. Tame it. Get it in shape. This is something that is invisible. Can't see it in a mirror, but you can feel it on the toilet. I mean, all of us have had tough times on the toilet, right? I mean, I know this is not maybe politically correct to talk about, but I want to put it out there because I'm not afraid to talk about the truth. If you've ever had queasy stomach, constipation, gassiness, you just didn't feel quite right, and you had a tough time once you sat on the toilet, that's your gut bacteria telling you something isn't quite right. Now is the time for you to address it. So gut health is brain health, is immune health, is overall health.
Wow. Well, that is extremely profound, and I'm sure that that is going to help a lot of people. One of the things that I was thinking about as you were kind of saying this, and of course, I should emphasize, this is not personalized medical advice. This is, just two handsome men chatting about brilliant ideas that they can learn more about in your books and this, that, and the other. Please go and, as Dr. Lee said, go and seek, you know, targeted advice for your own situation. But just with that disclaimer out the way, I would just love to just kind of just ask you on this point, because there seems to be so much confusion. Of course, obviously we're here talking about the benefits of food, and about food of medicine, and it goes back to Hippocrates, let food be thy medicine, of course. One of the things that I think a lot of people hear is obviously in terms of kind of starving cancer cells. And I'm just kind of curious in terms of how we bridge, obviously, the benefits of nutrition for, obviously, for, as you said, for strengthening these systems within our body that can heal us naturally, as you mentioned, the gut microbiome, with, of course, obviously not trying to feed the demons anymore.
Cancers are forming in our bodies all the time. They are microscopic and will never hurt us. And in fact, they can't grow larger than the tip of a ballpoint pen. Some people remember what ballpoint pens are. They're tiny, about 2 to 3 millimeters in diameter, and they can't get any bigger because they don't have any nutrition. They don't have a blood supply. They're not connected to your blood supply. They're just hanging out there like a pimple on your back, right? Now, if you looked in a mirror and you saw a pimple on your face, you would pay attention to it and maybe do something about it. But we've got pimples forming on our backs all the time. pimples on your butt. You don't even know you have them. And eventually they're going to go away. And that's what happens to these microscopic cancer. Our immune system wipes them out. And the reason that they stay small until our immune system takes care of them is because they don't have a blood supply, because our body is able to starve the cancer, prevent it from getting nutrition by cutting off the blood supply to cancer. So when I use the term starving cancers, that's what I'm referring to. The body does it by itself. Now, here's the um, interesting opportunity. We can actually eat foods to feed ourselves, and the natural substances, the bioactives in the foods, not only nourish our body, but they boost our health defenses. And one of the defenses that they boost is our body's own intrinsic ability to cut off the blood supply to feeding cancer. So there are foods that we can eat that will starve the cancer by helping our body cut off the blood supply. Ironically, you can eat to starve, right? Like you feed yourself, you fortify yourself, but you're actually starving the cancer. And some of the examples are green tea. The polyphenols, the catechins in green tea starve cancer by cutting off the blood supply. Tomatoes contain a carotenoid called lycopene. It's what makes tomatoes red. Lycopene has been shown to cut off the blood supply to cancer and also benefit your metabolism. And it's an antioxidant, powerful antioxidant as well. Coffee contains chlorogenic acid. Chlorogenic acid cuts off the blood supply to tumors. And chlorogenic acid also is a powerful anti-inflammatory substance, natural substance, that you get more of it, by the way, in organic coffee versus conventional coffee. Just a few examples. Broccoli, leafy greens, Brussels sprouts, kale, bok choy, they contain sulforaphanes. These sulforaphanes, and anybody listening to this, don't worry about memorizing the chemicals, all right? Leave that to people like me who do the research. Like I've got to master the tongue twisters. All you guys need to know is that the foods that actually taste really great, broccoli rabe, parboiled, and then sauteed in a cast iron pan with a little bit of extra virgin olive oil, some sliced garlic, add a splash of white wine, add some crushed red pepper flakes. I mean, come on. That would be an amazing dish. I could knock it out in 3 minutes. All right. And I like to cook, so I like to talk about this. Right. Your whole kitchen will smell great if I came over to cook it for you. So the point is, these foods, and then I pour you a cup of tea or give you a nice cup of espresso to actually have. These are the types of foods that you can regularly encounter. Oh, what about that Greek tomato salad? In the village salad, the horiatiki, right? The cucumbers with the cubitanes, and the sliced tomatoes with the extra virgin olive oil that contains hydroxytyrosol. All of these foods that you can eat that taste great can cut off the blood supply, help your body cut off the blood supply to feeding cancer.
One of the important things that we know that's a massive risk factor for diseases like cancer, of course, is obesity. The CDC, I was reading a report today that they estimate that about 11% of all cancers are driven by obesity. And I'm just curious, there's been so much public interest in GLP-1 agonists like Ozempic. I know that you've obviously worked at the cutting edge of biotech. I'm curious, how should the everyday person, obviously I'm not talking about someone that is, for instance, diabetic, but how should they be thinking about treatments like Ozempic in terms of reducing weight?
First of all, these GLP agonists, which is a fancy way of calling drugs like Ozempic and Jardiance and Wegovy, and there's going to be many, many more coming down the pike. They were originally used to treat people who are having difficulty controlling their blood sugars with type 2 diabetes. All right. And it works. It was only noticed later, after years after they were used in the specific situation of type 2 diabetes, it was noticed that, hey, you know what? People are also losing weight. So the weight loss was a side effect, a beneficial side effect for actually treating a metabolic disease. And once the weight loss effect was confirmed using really rigorous clinical trials, then the initial approval of these drugs were for people who had life-threatening obesity. people who, even if they had surgery, even they were on all kinds of medications and psychological counseling, like they couldn't. I mean, listen. We've all seen an individual like that at some point in our lives. Somebody who is like doesn't even fit the size characteristic of a human being. Someone huge, right? And there's no value judgment here. This is some people are just really, really large. They have life-threatening obesity, and these medicines were then approved for them. Okay. Now, what happened is that the idea of treating people who didn't have diabetes and didn't have morbid obesity started to catch fire. And again, in a free world, in a democracy where, you can buy pretty much anything, and health systems started to cover it because it's good for treating diabetes and treating obesity, and then later discovered to lower cardiovascular risk. Now, this is the horse out of the barn. Okay. But in this case, I think that there are some really major challenges. These drugs might be really beneficial for you if you're listening and have tried these medicines might be really beneficial for you as an individual. But as a society, if you take a look at the sheer number of people that actually are considered pre-diabetic or obese, I heard a number that if everybody who had excess weight, were overweight or obese, got in the United States, okay, this is obviously numbers much bigger than the rest of the world, got a GLP-1 agonist drug, prescription drug, it would cost the country, the United States, my country, $600 billion per year, which is twice the amount that we spend on every other drug combined. All right. So you can kind of see it's unsustainable. This furor, this enthusiasm, sort of like, it's sort of like, the crowds rushing out to a Taylor Swift concert, to try to buy tickets, or some other popular person. We can't sustain it. So what's another perspective on this? Well, the system's got to self-correct, so I leave that for the health authorities to figure it out, to try to be sensible about how to meter out and regulate the access to the drug to the people who need it the most. I think medical doctors also need to step up, and I'm talking about my community, need to actually decide how we're going to actually contribute to safeguarding the financial integrity of the health system as well, right? We can't just be giving stuff out like candy that's going to break the bank. And I think the third thing is that the people who benefit from it, they could really benefit from it. And so it's a tricky dilemma for us to say something that really is beneficial, that costs a ton of money, that everybody goes crazy over because it's about weight loss, that would break the bank in society. How do we juggle those competing interests? I want to do what's good for my patient, but I don't want to break the bank in society. I think that's a dilemma that remains to be figured out, but we got to figure it out pretty quickly. Now, what I'll also tell you, I'll throw for your listeners a few little nuggets that people won't know about. All right. Do you know, Joe, where these GLP-1 agonists were first discovered? What was the origin story of GLP-1 agonists?
Oh gosh, was it by accident, perhaps?
Uh, it was actually kind of by accident, but people were looking. Do you know what animal comes from? How about that?
Oh no, I don't. I don't.
It comes from the GLP-1 agonists were discovered in the Gila monster. Anybody who doesn't know what a Gila monster is, spelled Gila, go ahead and look it up on Google. You will see the most venomous lizard in the planet that lives in the American Southwest in the desert. It is one ugly MFR. Okay. It's got a blunt head. It's got a big body. It's about 2 feet long. Doesn't have scales. It's got little beads on its body, red and black beads. And this thing has got tiny little fangs that when they leap out and grab onto you, they just chew on you and deliver this venom. And in the blood of the Gila monster is where the first GLP-1 agonists were discovered that wound up later being developed into these drugs. So for anybody who doesn't know what the origin stories are, like, I think it gives us a better appreciation. This is powerful stuff. All right, number one. Number two is that this target, GLP agonists, GLP, what does it stand for? Glucagon-like peptide. Again, I don't want people who are listening to get bound up on the vocabulary, the tongue twisters, alphabet soup. Like, leave that to people like me. But you can read about a GLP-1 agonist. Agonist means that it pushes a button, all right? And the button it pushes is a GLP receptor. Now, we know that's in the brain. We know that the receptors in the brain, and we know that the gut makes the GLP naturally. Okay, so it tells our brain that we're full. So we know that one of the things that these weight loss drugs do is it makes you lose your appetite. First, bummer. You're not interested in food anymore. All right, like your favorite dish, no, thank you. That's a bummer. But number two, you definitely eat less. Number two, it actually prompts your pancreas in your body to release more insulin. That's good. So it actually helps your metabolism become a little bit better. It also slows the squeezing of your stomach, so you're not able to eat quite as much. So you fill up a little bit faster, which then slows the amount of calories you take. It's not surprising it causes weight loss, but, and now I'm putting on my scientist hat, and I'm giving you guys a little peek. Anybody listening, I'm giving you a little peek in the future. I believe that the weight loss caused by these GLP agonists is indeed only a side effect of these drugs. It's a beneficial side effect. But GLP is found in all the blood vessels in your body. It's found in many different organs. And one of the things that I believe is that as we go forward, we're going to develop and discover there are, I told you one of my drivers is discovery, that pushing the button, this GLP button, impossible to do reasonably with drugs that you have to slam into your belly, every week. But that pushing this button actually improves your overall health, lowers your risk for probably cancer, dementia, certainly diabetes. But like a lot of really serious diseases, this button, push, 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 actually is probably beneficial. Now, what a lot of people don't know, there are foods that can naturally trigger the GLP-1 button. You've got foods that you can eat that can actually push it as well. Not as powerfully as slamming a drug into your belly, kinder, gentler approach to it. But rather than not be interested or dislike food, maybe you can like food. So this is an area of research I'm working on now, and I'm definitely interested in metabolism and fighting harmful extra body fat. But man, what if we could actually prevent cancer with this? What if we could prevent Alzheimer's disease with it, or other forms of dementia, vascular dementia? Amazing potential here. But I think that so I guess I'm giving you a long-winded answer to say I'm truly excited by the science that has been uncovered and the potential for the future with the discoveries that are being made. But I'm taking a step back from the enthusiasm that everybody has about these drugs, the rush to actually use them, because while they may be beneficial for an individual, from a societal perspective, it's simply unsustainable. And I think that there are moral, economic, policy, legislative conversations that need to be had to be able to figure out what's the best way to handle it. And by the way, there are also side effects. When you inject this thing that originally came from the blood of the most venomous lizard in the world.
Could you please give us maybe 1 to 2 of these foods, and then tell these guys where they can connect with you before you run away?
Well, I'm not ready to talk about some of the foods that I'm researching because I'm very cautious about what's ready for prime time. But I will tell you, there's some very exciting research going on. But I'll tell you, if I had 3 foods, I would recommend everybody add to their diet for overall health, metabolic health, immune health. Ramp up your cancer defenses against cancer, improve your metabolism. I would actually tell you these would be my favorites. All right. Green tea. All right. Drink it. Good for you. And by the way, it's not just green tea. English breakfast tea is also good. And there's all kinds of fermented teas that are also good. Just don't put milk in it, because milk actually will make it harder to absorb some of the really beneficial polyphenols. You'll miss out on some of them. You'll get some, but you'll miss out on some of them. So green tea. Number two, I would actually tell you tree nuts, the snacks, like the trail mix. Okay. Walnuts, pecans, almonds, pistachios, macadamias, right? These are things that are ubiquitous. All right. Um, they are a great source of protein, plant-based protein, which we need. They're a good source of healthy plant-based fats. They're monounsaturated fatty acids and a little bit of polyunsaturated fatty acids, but they contain a ton of dietary fiber, and that dietary fiber feeds your gut microbiome. So when you're, just snacking on some tree nuts when you're watching your next movie or Netflix or whatever it is, you can actually be feeding your gut microbiome and lowering inflammation, which, as we discussed, has so many benefits. Number two. Number three, I would say berries, because berries come in so many forms. Strawberries, blackberries, blueberries, as I mentioned, raspberries. I love all those berries. These berries are small but powerful. They contain bioactives like anthocyanin, which is what's in blueberries and blackberries. They make the color really dark purple or black. You can have some in strawberries. You've got ellagic acid in strawberries. It's what makes strawberries tart. Strawberries are sweet and tart when they're ripe. The tartness comes from ellagic acid. These are antioxidant. They protect your DNA. They lower inflammation. They cut off the blood supply feeding cancer. They boost your immunity. And berries also have fiber to feed your gut microbiome. So, the foods that I mentioned, tea for a beverage, tree nuts, and berries. Put these into your life every day in some way, and you'll be actually taking a step in the right direction.
Amazing. Dr. Lee, tell these guys where they can connect with you.
Yeah, well, first of all, you can come to my website, which is drwilliamlee.com. I really been putting a lot of effort into an exciting YouTube channel that I have. Again, my handle is at Dr. William Lee, LI. I've been getting so many millions of views just in the last couple of months, and so I'm responding by putting out more content about more foods and more information like we talked about today, because that's what people want. And of course, you can buy my books, Eat to Beat Disease, which is not about disease, it's about health, and Eat to Beat Your Diet, which is not a diet book. It's about how to not ever need to go on a diet in order to lose weight. You can buy those anywhere where books are sold, and of course on social media as well. But I always have such a great time on this podcast speaking with you, Joe. Thanks for having me on.